Hey guys, Kevin Bupp here, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow podcast, where our mission is to help you build and maintain massive amounts of cash flow through income producing real estate investments. And our guest for this week's show is short-term rental expert, Dr. Rachel Gainsbrugh. Now, Rachel is the co-founder of a luxury boutique brand covering Georgia, Florida, Pennsylvania, and Tennessee that provides luxury vacation and workforce housing for families, medical professionals, and workers in other industries. So, guys, I'm excited to get onto the show with Rachel. But before we do it, just have a few quick housekeeping items to run through. First off, there is a chance that you might have heard that I recently released a book. It just actually became a best-selling book in Amazon, but I released it a few months back. It's called The Cash Flow Investor: How to Create Financial Freedom Investing in Commercial Real Estate. If you're actually watching the video of this, and you'll see it in my background, I've got a couple copies sitting up here on the shelf. And it's been a three years in the making. I mean, probably a little bit longer than that, but really it's a compilation of my last 20 years of as a full-time real estate investor, as well as the compilation of all the tips, tactics, and strategies that I've garnered over the 8.5 years I've been doing this podcast. I've interviewed hundreds and hundreds of incredibly successful real estate investors from basically every different industry over those 8.5 years. And so you can either, one of two things, you can either go buy a copy of the book on Amazon for $20, or for a limited time, I'm offering the book for free to my tribe of cash flow investors. And so if you want to grab your free copy, go over to kevinbupp.com/free book. Again, kevinbupp.com/free book. And again, I cover all aspects of commercial real estate, but more specifically, how to build massive cash flow and wealth via commercial real estate investments. And so go grab that free copy. I don't know how long I'm going to keep it up there, so grab it. Or if you're so inclined, go to Amazon. You can purchase a copy there as well. All the proceeds go to a nonprofit that's near and dear to my heart. So with that, moving on here. Another housekeeping I want to run through. I get emails all the time, quite often actually, asking really what we're up to at Sunrise Capital Investors. Yeah, that's our investment arm, our private equity group. And as always, just in addition to doing this podcast, I mean, we're busy. We're busy doing what we do best, and that's seeking out investment opportunities that have the best risk-adjusted returns, which is actually, it's really the catalyst for our most recent fund launch. Okay, so we just launched a fund just about a month and a half ago. It's called the SCI Phoenix Build to Rent Fund 4. And if you guys don't know about build to rent, some of you might not even know what that terminology means. But I mean, if you don't know about build to rent, then you really need to get into the know. And per Green Street Data, which is one of the most well-respected institutional data sources on the planet, per Green Street Data, build to rent residential real estate has taken the lead ahead of every other asset class as far as risk-adjusted returns, best risk-adjusted returns, even better than mobile home parks, which are near and dear to my heart. And so if you want to learn more about partnering with us on some build-to-rent projects, or just generally speaking, you want to learn more about the build-to-rent industry, go check out a webinar that we most recently did about a month ago. You can check out the webinar. It's very detailed in nature. You can go to kevinbupp.com/BTR fund. Again, that's kevinbupp.com/BTR fund. And in addition to getting access to that webinar, you'll also get on our mail list so that you'll get updates as to when we're doing a weekly webinar series that we started about a month and a half ago. And so we're literally diving in even deeper on a weekly basis as it relates to build to rent. And so that's a weekly series in addition to the webinar that we put out there for our fund. And so you can learn everything and anything that your heart desires about build to rent. And so again, kevinbupp.com/BTR fund. And now with that, guys, I'd like to welcome my guest for today's show, Dr. Rachel Gainsbrugh. Rachel, how you doing today?
Hey, Kevin, I am doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for all of the content that you put out there for the community. Very educational. So grateful for you.
Oh, I appreciate that, Rachel. And thank you for taking time out of your busy day from managing short-term rentals, which I'm excited to talk about here about today, to join us. So excited to kind of dive into it and peel back the layers a little bit of your business. And so maybe first and foremost, Rachel, for those that don't know you, don't know your name, don't know what it is you do, take a few minutes to tell us a little more about yourself.
Sure, absolutely. So I am a pharmacist by day, semi-retired, real estate investor by night is what I like to say. a mom to two boys. I have a whole husband, three dogs. So I am one busy woman for sure. But our portfolio is 18 short-term rentals. And we also have midterm rentals, which you alluded to a little bit with the corporate rentals as well. And so we use systems and automation in order to streamline that. Our most recent claim to fame was being a host for an executive that was coming in for the movie industry, as well as having a property featured on Netflix that comes out beginning of September, and book launch as well. So we've been really busy, not only in the short-term rental space, but just sharing the information, educating other medical professionals on how to get in as well.
Well, that's exciting. I'm excited to dive into it. So why don't we start with the markets? I'd mentioned 4 different markets, or just generally speaking, states that you guys are located in. I don't know if you have multiple markets within those states, but maybe speak to us about really what really drove you. You have 18 short-term rentals, or just, I guess, executive short-term rentals, whatever you want to classify them as, and ultimately they're spread throughout 4 different states. Tell me about those particular markets and what actually attracted you to those particular areas.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started in my own backyard, and I'm a believer in starting in your own backyard if you can swing it. I know some people live in really higher cost of living areas, so it may not be feasible. But if you can, start in your own backyard. So I'm in Georgia, and that's why I started here. But the more I collaborated with others in masterminds, we identified some other places perhaps where there were deals. And so one of which was the Poconos of Pennsylvania. I'm a Florida girl originally, so I also wanted to have a place in Florida. So we're building in Florida, and Tennessee is right next door. And we know that Tennessee is hot. So the mountain areas, like the smoky areas of Tennessee. So as far as the specific markets, we have, I would say, 2 different types of assets. We have like the traditional vacation rental assets. And then in the Georgia areas, we actually have more so of those executive rentals, midterm rentals, which we house primarily medical executives or insurance guests. So guests who are displaced from their luxury homes, who need a place to stay temporarily, say it's 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. We've had someone stay with us for 11 months, and the insurance company foots the bill for that.
Okay, fantastic. Well, that's intriguing. I think everyone that's listening at least has a general concept of what short-term vacation rentals are. They probably have either stayed in one or they're familiar with the concept. But the executive, I want to hit on the executive component here. You said medical professionals, as well as those that are dealing with an insurance challenge, that might be living in a really nice home, maybe they had a fire, maybe they had a flood, and they're displaced for a period of time. Talk to me about how, I guess, let's talk to the medical professionals first. What are the demand drivers that are near to these particular rental units that are ultimately attracting them to your area? Are there hospitals, medical campuses?
Yeah. So let's talk about that and the market as a whole, as far as looking at what would make a good short-term rental if you're in a suburban area. It's obvious, like you said, the vacation rentals, right?
Yeah.
So the suburban area, there are about 4 or 5 different verticals or so: university, airport, hotel, hospital, and a specific sector, like an industry, like the film industry or a plant of some sort. If your property is within 30 minutes of any one of those verticals, again, universities, hospitals, hotels, airports, that property can make a potential short-term rental. Okay. You want to look at regulations, of course. Everything we say on here has to be like legal. You're looking at regulations, but outside of that, if there's no restrictions, that property can potentially be a good short-term rental. And so those are the types of individuals who come to us, whether it's a professor and his family, because we do have the larger homes, or an executive that's training at a hospital that is going to be a CEO. Well, it's not a weekend training program. It's usually a 4-month or 6-month training program. As they get onboarding, they're trying to figure out which neighborhoods are going to be a good fit for them and their family. They reach out to us, so relocation type services. And again, like I mentioned, we have, for whatever reason, a lot of fires, a lot of bursted pipes, flooring needs to be removed. And those individuals, due to the delay in the supply chain, delay in the workforce, they end up staying with us for months and months and months as well.
Okay. So again, let's stick on that topic. Again, we all know what the demand drivers are for the vacation rentals, right? There's some type
Yes.
of tourist attraction or, something of that nature that's driving folks to be in that particular area that want to be there. But how do you, when you're looking for these executive type of long-term rentals, how are you going to, if you're looking at a new market, like I get it, your backyard, like everyone's got a
Mhm.
familiarity with their backyard, so you can gain an additional level of comfort that someone else might not be able to, that's out of state or out of that local marketplace. And so when you're going to another marketplace or looking for an opportunity somewhere else that you're not overly familiar with, you can look at demographics, you can look at the data, but really, how do you get down to the brass tacks and make a determination that there's actually a demand for your product in that particular marketplace?
So for me, the data is key still,
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm looking at for the data are travel patterns. I use a number of different apps to identify what are the travel patterns, what are the occupancy rates for medium term and short term rentals in different markets. So for instance, one of those tools is a free tool called, am I allowed to call out a tool
Yeah,
online?
absolutely. I was
Okay.
going to ask you, please share if you would.
Okay, awesome. AirDNA.co.
Okay.
AirDNA.co is a free tool. Of course, it's freemium. If you want to go deeper, you pay. But what I see on the free version already lets me know whether or not there's going to be an opportunity for a short-term rental there. You simply place the address in the field, the number of bedrooms, the number of bathrooms, and the number of guests. And number of guests, my rule of thumb is 3 to 4 guests per bathroom. So I count my guest count is based on the bathroom count, because
Okay.
those 5 bedroom, 1 bathroom, no, we're not gonna stick like 20 people in there. So bathrooms are very important. So once I see that, I get 3 numbers that are identified: daily rate, annual revenue. I don't care about those numbers. The only number I care about is the occupancy rate for that market. If the occupancy rate for that market is 50% or higher, I'm golden at 50%. Lower than 50%, it tells me there's not a demand in the area. The only thing they're building is a tractor supply, right? It was a true story. So that's like doubling down on the fact that, this is more of a rural, non-well-traveled area. So number one, if I'm 30 minutes within any of those verticals and then I do my occupancy test, I'm interested. I'm very interested in that market,
Okay.
if that makes sense. And then of course the numbers, right? My ROI, once I start to get into the dollars, that's how I start to formulate my decision.
How accurate is using that tool, AirDNA? I mean, have you found it to be fairly accurate? I mean, when you're trying to determine what the average daily rates are, I mean, have you found there's a fairly close alignment of where you truly end up if you end up buying in that marketplace?
The average daily rate as well as the annual revenue is not very accurate at all.
Okay, it's not.
Okay, especially in the freemium. No, it's not very accurate at all, especially
Okay.
in the freemium
How do we
version.
find accurate data then? Is there another tool, or do you just have to pay for the good data?
It's not really a tool. I still use AirDNA, but I have to do a few gymnastics in order to make it make sense. The occupancy I found to be fairly accurate, and that's why I just care about the occupancy. And then the next thing I do, if I'm going to put money into escrow, I do buy, the month subscriptions anywhere from $30 and $99. And then I'll look in, and what you will see is just a list of all of the properties, how much revenue they generated, and so on and so forth. So I kind of cannibalize that. I say, okay, this one I'm excluding. That's not real data. I can quickly see what's real data and what isn't based on like 3 or 4 parameters, one of which is, they say the annual revenue is 300,000, but they only had 2 bookings. Well, where did you get that information from? Like, did you just extrapolate the heck out of Super Bowl weekend and like spread it
Yeah.
out throughout? So those are the things that I tease out. And then what I'm left with are true comps, if that
That's
makes sense.
interesting. Do they have a direct API plugin to Airbnb? Is that where they get
Yes.
their data from? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that I didn't realize that. So that's
And
good to know.
VRBO as well.
And VRBO. Got it.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
Mhm.
How about the risk of oversaturation? I mean, you're doing your studies, and it looks like the market's got demand for your particular type of product. You're doing your due diligence. You buy a home there, you convert it to a short-term rental, whether it be for vacations or executives, whatever the demand is in that particular market. But then now everyone else gets the word that this is a great business, but some people don't do all their homework like maybe you did. And have you seen, maybe not you with your personal investments, but have you, I feel like short-term rentals have exploded
Yeah.
during the, the COVID era, right? And not
Mhm.
just people going to stay at them, but also people doing these, staycations or, traveling by car versus getting on an airplane and
Mhm.
going on vacation, right? And so a lot of people that maybe had never even stayed in a short-term rental before found themselves in a short-term rental over COVID, right? As they're vacationing with their family. They're like, well, this might be a great idea for us to maybe buy one of these, in the mountains or wherever they might be visiting. And is there a risk? Do you feel like there's a risk of oversaturation? And are there any markets that you know of where you've seen maybe students or other people in the forums you follow that have seen that actual challenge play out?
A couple of things, Kevin, and that's why I kind of niche in the luxury space. I won't get on my soapbox right this second. So, oversaturation or saturation is actually a scientific and economic term, right? So, it means that we have an increased number of product, but the number of dollars generated by that product is reduced. So, for instance, if there's demand, we have a lot more product
Mhm.
and then the revenue is higher. But saturation would be a lot more short-term rentals, but the average daily rate, if it trends downward, then we have saturation. Okay, so the number, I would say, don't let the number of units that are propping up intimidate you. It's really the value. Are there still individuals willing to pay to stay at those places, pay the same prices, pay higher?
Mhm.
So that's the difference between demand and saturation. So it's really a I hear saturation because it just doubled in the number of product, but there's more people wanting to come to that area. If it's
Mhm.
a hot area, then that's not saturation, that would be called demand. So I don't want to misspeak, but off the top of my head, I think 2 weeks ago, I was looking at some markets. I think the Houston market, and guys, if you're from Houston, please don't come for me. But I think the Houston market, I saw that there was an increase in the number of product and a decrease in the number of dollars generated
Mm.
in proportion to that number of product. So that would lead me towards saturation. Arizona, around Scottsdale, I saw increase in the number of product, but increase in the number of dollars, but it was linear. So to me,
Yeah.
that was stability. It was
Yeah.
stable. And then there are some other markets that I saw increase in the number of product and a significantly more like a 2x increase in revenue. So that tells me there's a high demand in that area.
Got it. Got it. How about have you seen, and this might be more of a broad brush stroke question, but have you seen any type of slowdown post COVID as it relates to short term rentals? As far,
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we have, especially for some of the mountain regions. So I'm in Georgia. So the Blue Ridge area, I have seen some slowdown. So I've seen an increase in the number of product and some decrease in the number of dollars we were expecting with that increase in product. So there has been some slowdown. We can now travel overseas again.
Hmm.
So we're not necessarily limited to our drive-to markets that we know, like, and love, but we want to go to other countries apparently. And so because of that, you have more options. And so we're starting to see some of that as well. But here's the deal, Kevin. I said I wasn't gonna go on my soapbox, but I want to get on real quick. Where I'm seeing that there's no change at all are in the higher end luxury products. And so if you're in the top 5 or 10% of the market, you do not fluctuate or compete with everyone else. So it's only you and a few others. And so it's you and the guests. Between you and them, you're just trying to figure out, if you want to host them, if they want to stay with you, that's it. You're not competing with all of the other
Hmm.
units that are there. If you're going to launch a meh type of property, a social property, yes, you're going to be in that red ocean just fighting for your life. But I like to stay in the blue ocean, set apart, just create my own destiny, so to speak. So I'm not that girl who's going to necessarily have 100 doors. I don't anticipate that. I actually reduce, I'll do 1031 exchanges to do bigger and better. So less is more for me because I want to stand out from the crowd. I want to
Hmm.
be closer to the water. I want to be with the views, and I'm willing to pay a little bit more for it, but through cost segregation studies and my 1031 exchange and leveraging those tax benefits to do so. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
no, absolutely, absolutely. I love that. I appreciate you sharing.
Mhm.
Talk to me about the debt. What type of financing is available for these short-term rentals? And I guess you probably have to attack it from two different angles. Assuming that it's not a short-term rental today, and you're purchasing it to convert it to one, or one that's actually got some financial track record associated with it. Are there good debt terms out there?
Yeah, so there are, and it depends on where you are in life, right? So I leverage my W 2 for the vast majority of our debt, and we use second home loans, vacation home loans that would take a look at our annual income from our W 2 and so on and so forth. But once you get to like number 4 or 5, you start hitting that debt to income ratio, right? So that's when you go to the debt service coverage ratio loans, the DSCR loans, which are more like commercial loans, where they're taking into consideration the air DNA data. Believe it or not, they look at the air DNA revenue and they underwrite based on that for the most part. They'll look at
Wow.
some other things too, but that's why it's important to understand that data, where if you need to defend yourself as to why your pro forma looks a certain way, or if you need to, back up and, take a step back on what you think that property is going to generate. So the air DNA data is one that a lot of these commercial lenders use in order to underwrite these properties. And the third one is, for instance, if you have a lot of losses and you're still creating a lot of revenue, bank statement loans is another product that some members in my community have leveraged as well. I haven't personally, but I've seen some students in our program leverage bank statement loans, meaning you're self-employed. You look bad on paper, but there's a lot of deposits coming in.
Sure.
So you know how that goes with
Yeah.
taxes. Yeah.
Interesting.
Lots of
Interesting.
write-offs. Yeah. So, okay. So going back, here's why I love the second home loans. They were 10% down, 10% down. So I got a lot of those, as many of those puppies as I could. The DSCR loans are anywhere from 15% to 20% down, or 25% down. It depends on income, on debt, on your credit score, not your personal income. Again, the property's projected income. And then the bank statement loans, I've heard they could be as low as 10% down.
Wow. That's surprising. That is actually shocking. So in any event, yeah, yeah. Um, so I want to talk about the property management. We only have a few minutes left for it to wrap this
Sure.
up, and so I definitely want to hit on the property. I have more questions about the debt piece, but I want to make sure we hit the property management, because I think
Part two,
that
part two.
yeah, that's an important topic that I think
Yeah.
it's on a lot of folks' mind. I mean, when people are thinking just buying rental property in general, whether it's a single family home, whether it's an apartment complex, whether it's a mobile home park, it doesn't really make a difference. If they're the first inkling, if they're not an experienced landlord, haven't been down this road before, is like, well, I don't want to manage this thing. Like, what's that consist of? And then now you're speaking to like a short term vacation rental. It's more of a hotel than it is a single family rental, because you've got way more turns happening. And depending on what your minimum stay is, I mean, you could have 2 turns, 3 turns a week, and so just a very different property management structure is necessary in order to manage that unit. So talk to me about how you handle the management of these assets.
Absolutely. And so it is going to be a heavier lift, but it's so worth it, especially for my higher income earning individuals. So the docs, the pharmacists, the dentists that are in our program, if they can manage it for a number of, weeks or hours, talk to your tax advisor, they can claim material participation. And what that does is allows them to get all of those losses against their W-2 income.
Yeah.
Even if they decide the next year to have it, handed off to a full property management service, if they can cover a few, we love to launch in December, a few hours in December, it's like, everyone get your property now, and then they manage it in December, do all the shopping. They get their bonus depreciation, cost segregation, and material participation, and the next year they hand it off. Because here's the deal: if you are going to self-manage, you need a team. You need a trustworthy, detail-oriented team of cleaners. You need maintenance, people. You need to have them on speed dial, and you need virtual assistants if you are looking to go passive. We have doctors who are in emergency room. Who's going to respond? Because the response times are important, right? So the virtual assistant can respond and hold it down for them if they would need to escalate to that homeowner.
But
So it requires those three. It's like the three-legged chair: your virtual
yeah.
assistant, your cleaners, and your maintenance people.
But that probably, if you just had one unit, it'd probably be hard to justify having that team on hand, correct? I mean, 'cause the virtual assistant, I guess, would be on your payroll, and ultimately the other, the other services would just be contractual. But still, would you say that one could justify actually having that put in place, just if they only had one unit, or would they need a couple of them in order to justify that team?
Well, the team cleaners, unless you're going to clean yourself. I started myself. There's no
Yeah,
shame
yeah,
in
yeah.
my game, right? But you want to outsource that as soon as possible.
Absolutely.
So yes,
Yes.
you and the cleaners, that's a pass-through cost because the guest pays for the cleaner,
Sure.
right? Maintenance men, well, that's going to come out of your bill. That's a
Yep.
business expense, right? But the virtual assistant, 4 or 5 hours a week while you're at your peak times, definitely, even if it's someone from overseas who has your templates that they can copy and paste and repeat everything you have said because the questions repeat themselves,
Sure.
right? So yes, even with one unit you can onboard a small but mighty team.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I think we will have to do a part two because there's definitely more questions I want to talk about. I know we're crunched for time here, Rachel, but I appreciate you coming on. For those that want to learn more about you and what you have going on, where's the best place to find you?
Well, I have a resource for you. Go to 75gems.com. That's the number 75gems.com to find my 75 cities with the highest profitability for short-term rentals. So that's the list I'm going by. I update it quarterly, so have a look for yourself.
All righty, fantastic. Well, Rachel, thanks again for joining us. It's been a lot of fun having you.
Thank you so much, Kevin. I appreciate you.
All right, guys, that's all we have for this week's show. So until we meet again next week, this is your host, Kevin Bupp, wishing you huge success. Take care.